Hello everyone, boys and girls, squids and squidettes, it's me, your father, your actual dad, here to delight your sensibilities with another Yammy Noob video. Motorcyclists of all types love modding their bikes. Cruiser boys like to install some wicked ape hangers and chrome skulls, fast boys like to install racing slicks and tinted windscreens, and adventure boys like to install cup holders and massage seats. Mods here, mods there, mods everywhere, but alas, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. As a beginner rider, your chances of modifying your bike in poor taste are likely. As a little baby squid, you just haven't learned right from wrong yet. At best, an ill-advised modification done by a beginner rider would just make your bike look a little dorky or juvenile. And at worst, a misdirected attempt at modification will impede your ability to develop good riding skills or leave you spending a bunch of money that you will never be able to recoup. I recently saw a stretched KTM Duke 200 on Facebook Marketplace. Why? We'll never know. So without further ado, let's talk about the 9 modding mistakes that beginner riders make. Today's video is sponsored by our friends over at Rockform. I will tell you more about them later in the show. Let's get into it. One of the first ways a beginner rider can negatively modify their bike is by changing the exhaust. Okay, hold on a sec, you didn't let me finish. Not all modifications to the exhaust on a beginner bike are bad, but many of them are. There are two ends of the exhaust modification spectrum. There is the DIY hillbilly method, where the rider either drills hole out of the baffles on a stock exhaust system or just outright cuts their muffler off entirely. And honestly, just don't. Sure, some stock exhaust will sound a little bit better with the baffles drilled out, but it just comes across as a little cheap. It's like what the one mod a middle-aged man with a 2005 Honda Shadow did to he feels earned the right to wear a built not bought t-shirt to bike night. But stock mufflers usually look pretty terrible too, and no amount of crafty handiwork can change that. And if they're not taking power tools to their stock exhaust systems, some cheapskate riders are just buying the cheapest universal mufflers off eBay and custom fabricate them to fit. I will be perfectly honest, my Ninja 400 Endurance race bike has one of these pipes on it. Don't judge me. These mufflers sound terrible and will look worse than stock. Don't do that either. On the other end of the spectrum for the ill-advised beginner exhaust mods are installing a full system exhaust. The amount of money and time it will cost to install a full exhaust system is never worth it on a beginner bike. You'll have to remove the cats, the header pipes, O2 sensors, get a new exhaust gasket. It's just far more complicated than putting on a slip-on exhaust. Plus, you'll have a whole bunch of check engine lights and the possibility for fueling issues if nothing is done to the ECU. It's just not worth it. The solution? A tasteful, simple slip-on from a reputable manufacturer. It will cost you a few $100, but it will improve the sound and look of your bike. And while you don't want to sell the farm to outfit your beginner bike with too many unnecessary mods, a slip-on exhaust is a nice little treat that every beginner rider deserves. In that same mentality of searching for non-existent power gains, the next beginner motorcycle mistake is tuning your motorcycle by either flashing the ECU or installing some sort of power commander. While there are always benefits to tuning a motorcycle, which can usually improve fueling and throttle response, it just isn't something that makes sense to do on a beginner bike that is not making much power to begin with and has little power to be found in the engine. Typically, this would be done in conjunction with a full system exhaust installation, which, as you already know, is a little bit pointless on a beginner bike. And if you're one of those strange tinkerers who absolutely dedicated to squeezing as much power out of a small motorcycle as possible, then go for it. But the sooner you admit that you will only get so far, the less likely your soul will become crushed after you spend $7 grand modifying your Royal Enfield only to find that it's still just a Royal Enfield. If you're into motorcycle racing and track riding, turning your old beginner bike into a track toy can be a good excuse for continuously putting money into it, despite all the signs telling you it isn't the smartest idea. As I said, my Ninja 400 Endurance bike that we race, it now has launch control. Why? Because reasons. For 99.9% of riders, if you want a faster bike, just buy a faster bike. That's usually the answer. One of the biggest mistakes beginner riders make when modifying their motorcycles are installing cheap accessories. The moment the algorithm recognizes you ride a motorcycle, the shadowy digital conglomerates will start shilling their Chinese Wish.com motorcycle accessories all up and down your social media feeds. And one of the worst offenders are cheap motorcycle phone mounts. You spend $900 or whatever whatever the new iPhone costs, and you're gonna trust it to a case and mount that in total costs $399 with free shipping from Wuhan? Get out of here with that. Cheap motorcycle parts and accessories are a major no-go for motorcyclists. Buy cheap, buy twice is the expression, and rarely is there ever an exception for that rule. When it comes to phone accessories for motorcyclists, I can only recommend Rockform. Rockform's phone cases have 6 feet of drop protection. At 6 feet, your phone should be safe from even the dankest of 12 o'clock wheelies, but it won't fall off anyway because you'll be using a Rockform mount as well. They've got a handlebar and stem mounts you can attach your phone to any type of motorcycle. Don't fall for knockoffs or imitations. Get yourself a Rockform phone case and handlebar mount and make sure your digital lifeline stays in pristine condition. And because you're a loyal fan of the Yam, you can use code YN25 at rockform.com and you'll receive 25% off of your order. Again, that is rockform.com with the code YN25 at checkout for 25% off. Don't buy cheap eBay motorcycle accessories. Just don't. A mistake that is common amongst beginner motorcycle riders is the use of cheap or inappropriate tires on your motorcycle. You may have bought a Kawasaki Vulcan for $1,000 that's been sitting in some guy's garage for 10 years, rotting away the tires, or maybe you bought a brand new Royal Enfield that you don't want to trust your life to the Zoom Cruise rubber that comes with them from the factory. Either way, it is important to get yourself some high quality tires that are appropriate for your style of riding. Are you a devout fast boy, eager to drag elbow on city streets? Well, first of all, don't do that. And second of all, don't buy super sport tires. For daily street use, sport touring tires will last you a lot longer and provide all the traction you need under every circumstance. If you're modifying your beginner bike in an attempt to shave seconds off of your commute, you're doing it wrong. Similarly, if you're an ADV noob with a baby adventure bike, but your motorcycle has never actually left the pavement other than going down a gravel road once to purchase a secondhand set of rain gear from a highly motivated Craigslist seller, it probably makes sense to get some tires that are pretty street biased instead of the true dual sport 50-50 tires. Buy tires for the type of riding you actually do and be honest with yourself, not for the type of riding you tell people you do. And don't cheap out. Tires are the only thing keeping you actually planted on the ground when riding a motorcycle. Beginner rider, advanced rider, intermediate rider, easy rider, really any type of rider needs to take note of this modding mistake because it is not just a faux pas for baby squids, but squids of all ages. And that's using spray paint, plasti dip, or any sort of spray-on paint type material on your motorcycle. Paint work is expensive. You know why? Because it's hard. Hard enough that painters can charge an arm and a leg because you cannot really do it correctly in your garage. You may think you can, but you just can't. And if you have a lot of time and materials and patience, maybe you can get close to painting certain small individual parts, but just taking a can of Rust-Oleum to your wheels or engine case is never gonna look very good. Don't paint your bike, please. And don't get me started on plasti dip. Like, are you trying to make your motorcycle look like the bed of a pickup truck? Plasti dip never turns out the way you think it will, and ends up peeling and bubbling and looking worse than whatever scratch you were trying to cover up. And while we're talking on the subject of scratches, don't sticker bomb your motorcycle. Nobody really wants to see the collection of stickers you've been hoarding since 2005. Oh, look at that, you've got Flame Boy and Wet Willy from World Industries on your gas tank. That isn't random at all and definitely isn't meant to cover up damage on your plastics from when your bootlace got stuck on your foot peg while pulling up to a stoplight and you dropped the bike. You just really like niche references to early 2000s skate culture. Makes perfect sense to me. I'm also a connoisseur. Speaking of sticking things where they don't belong, another modification that screams, I'm a new rider desperately searching for individuality is the use of heat tape or rim tape. Outside of taping up your lights or mirrors for a track day, there are very few instances in which tape is needed on a motorcycle. Unless you're into that sort of rat rod, crusty chopper look, heat tape on your exhaust, it just kind of looks weird. And I mean, it looks bad on a chopper too, but the whole rest of the chopper is probably hard on the eyes as well, so at least it's cohesive. And what's the deal with rim tape? I don't even know why people do this. It just looks corny and they're always peeling off and flapping around. Yes, it's a little bit more high visibility, but it's just unnecessary. If you want to use reflective rim tape for better visibility, just wear a high-vis jacket instead. It'll do a better job. A big modding mistake beginner riders usually make is summoning what I call the delete fairy. They'll say, well, Papa Yam decreed I shall not increase the power of my beginner bike, so instead I shall gain power by shedding excess weight. Nay, my child, deleting everything is not the way. Think your stock mirrors are ugly? Well, they might be, but just leave them there until they snap off because you forgot to put your kickstand down and dumped your bike on its side. Also, they work really well. Don't delete your mirrors or delete your turn indicators. That's total squid behavior. Sooner or later, you'll have a more forever bike that you can afford to modify and put some money into. Then you can buy the fancy high-end mirrors and get an integrated tail light if you really can't stand the look of the turn signals. But when you're a beginner rider, just run what you have. You gotta be able to see behind you with your mirrors. You gotta be able to signal when you're gonna turn. And as I mentioned earlier, keep the delete fairy away from your muffler and your catalytic converter. You are not a meth head. Don't go chopping off catalytic converters with an angle grinder. If you want your bike to have a decent resale value when you're ready to move on, it's gotta have the most parts on it. If the delete fairy gets too hungry, you might end up with a bike that's closer to a rolling chassis than you had anticipated. Another lowbrow modification that just kind of screams immature rider are the sketchy, borderline illegal license plate relocations. And I say immature rider versus beginner rider because there are plenty of cruiser guys that have been riding for ages who still do this mod. A license plate should be in a nice holder with the DOT requiring light and all that sort of stuff. Look, I'm not a narc, but the janky license plate mods just seem tacky on cruisers and ridiculously squiddly on sport bikes. I will be completely honest, when I started riding, I had a very sketchy looking license plate mod on my bike so that I didn't have to pay tolls, wink wink. On cruisers, the license plate is always like moved to the side of the rear axle, bent in half, turned inside out, and held on by zip ties. And clapped Gixxer squids will stick their license plate as far back as the rear fender is possible. So it'll be so far back in there that you risk slicing on your tire anytime you go over the smallest bump in the road. And I don't get the mentality, is it to be secretive and mysterious? I just feel like you increase your chances of getting lit up by a cop without even speeding, just having a suspicious license plate placement. Big plastic fenders that come stock on motorcycles are hideous, I agree. But a nice modest tail tidy can clean that up and keep you well within your rights as a motorcyclist. Putting your license plate in an unusual and suspicious place as an act of rebellion is just really putting attention onto yourself. And the last mistake beginners make when modifying their bikes is installing carbon fiber parts. Yes, that even includes fake carbon fiber. This is a PSA, you don't need carbon fiber on your street bike. If you own a forever bike and have money to blow, cool, get those Farkles, baby. We had an R1 as a giveaway bike, I put a carbon fiber front fender on it, it was amazing. Also my Hayabusa has one too. But a beginner rider has zero need for carbon fiber mirrors or carbon fiber winglets. I mean, zero bikes truly need carbon fiber at all, but I recognize there's a time and place for it. If there's a lesson for this entire video, it is that really the greatest mistake a beginner rider can make when modifying their bike is just doing too much, spending too much money, taking too many parts away, or making weird or cheap aesthetic modifications. If you're a beginner rider, you should be riding and learning how to ride better and learning how to properly maintain your bike. If you want a little bit more feedback, install a simple slip-on exhaust. If you want to clean up the look of your bike, install a tail tidy. And then for the rest, leave all the cheap and tacky mods to the eBay Cafe Racer kids or TikTok street squids. End of rant. Fact. The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro, located in present-day Pakistan, had a remarkably advanced sanitation system over 4,000 years ago. The city had a complex network of underground sewers and a sophisticated drainage system, with every house connected to it. This ancient civilization had a level of urban planning and hygiene that was far ahead of its time. Goodbye.